All right, we're back live. Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. Now, 7:12, and let's talk about student loan debt that is going to be, quote, forgiven upwards to $10,000 for all student loan debt carriers and an additional $10,000 if the borrower took out Pell Grants. Those are grants for higher education for certain income thresholds. But you also have other various things that are going to be done with student loan debt, including looking at repayment plans. And I think one aspect of what was announced yesterday by President Joe Biden would deal with putting a cap of 5% of annual income is what needs to be paid per year to cover somebody's student loan debt. So this obviously is being seen as politics. It's being seen as something that's necessary. Depending on who you ask, you get these different responses. But one thing that I think is certain here is that there's a lot of continued questions, and people are obviously hopping on this to have their voice heard. And I definitely want to hear from you at 217-629-7970. Again, 217-629-7970. That's how you can chime in here with Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. But before we get there, who exactly is this for? This is Fox News' Peter Doocy talking with the U.S. Department of Education Secretary, getting just at least one question in to clarify who exactly is eligible for this, quote, forgiveness.
But just the final one on this, sure. The people that already paid their student loans, right, they don't get anything out of this deal.
Right.
That's right. Okay.
All right. So, they don't get anything out of this deal. So it's not for those of you out there who paid off your student loans. So let's now hear from President Joe Biden, who obviously made the announcement yesterday. We kind of saw all this coming. But the president talking about the student loan debt and what his administration is going to do in order to ultimately alleviate some of the pressures on those individuals who carry that debt. So here's President Joe Biden yesterday making some of the announcement about quote-unquote forgiveness.
So my message to all servants, all public servants, all those who are the ones that are volunteering, is out with student debt to go. Here's where you want, if you're worried about how to do it, go to pslf.gov before October 31st to see if you qualify for public service student loan forgiveness.
So that's the president talking about the other thing that's already law, the public student loan forgiveness, and that's a bureaucratic nightmare from my understanding of people dealing with this. But announcing that, we've got this public student loan forgiveness program. It took them a little bit to try to get that out, stumbling on the words and whatnot. But ultimately, he says that, quote unquote, canceling student loans won't have any impact on inflation. Again, here's President Joe Biden from yesterday.
Resuming student loan payments at the same time as we provide targeted relief, we're taking an economically responsible course. As a consequence, about $50 billion a year will start coming back into the Treasury because of resumption of debt. Independent experts agree that these actions taken together will provide real benefits for families without meaningful effect on inflation.
So the president talking about how this isn't going to impact inflation. But you talk to others, and they see it definitely in a different light. Now, yesterday, part of the Illinois Farm Bureau Ag Legislative Roundtable they hosted, they had the U.S. Senate candidates there, incumbent Tammy Duckworth and Republican challenger Kathy Salvi. And I want to share with you their reaction in the Q&A with media afterwards about President Biden's plan to, quote-unquote, forgive upwards to $10,000 of student loan debt, if not $20,000 for those who get Pell Grants. So we'll hear that. But first, your phone calls at 217-629-7970. Good morning.
This is just pure politics, and what it's doing, it's appealing to the lazy of our society, people that don't want to pay their bills. it's also very anti-blue collar. Why should the blue collar workers out there have to pay for a bunch of deadheads who don't want to pay their debts?
Yeah, and a lot of people who decided not to go to college because they saw, well, that could lead me into a lot of debt, so they decided to go into the trades instead. And they're doing very well right now. And just last year, they were probably looking and saying, you know what, I'm an essential worker. I work at a construction site. I do this, that, and the other. I'm working. I don't have much debt at all. If it's only my house, okay. But they didn't have that college debt. So, yeah, it is a bit unfair. And the president was actually asked on his way out by ABC's Karen Travers about, is this fair? And here's the question and how the president reacted to that question asked yesterday after his announcement.
The president, is this unfair to people who paid their student loans or chose not to take out loans?
Is it fair to people who, in fact, do not own multi-billion-dollar businesses? They see why these guys give them all the tax breaks. Is that fair? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure how that answers the question with a totally different situation, but okay. Now back to the U.S. Senate candidates, incumbents Tammy Duckworth and the Republican challenger Kathy Salvi talking about this yesterday. Here's how they addressed the question of their thoughts on President Joe Biden's move to, quote, forgive student loan debt. And we'll get to the question of who's paying for this. Right? You can't just wipe debt away. Who's going to be paying for this? But here is Tammy Duckworth talking about what she wanted to see happen, followed up by the Republican Kathy Salvi. Again, this is from yesterday's Q&A with media at the Illinois Farm Bureau's Legislative Roundtable.
I think it's a good start. I would support forgiving $50,000 in student loan debt for for folks who hold student loan debt. There's more more student loan debt held in this country than credit card debt. If we were to forgive $50,000 in student loan debt, that would eliminate about 80% of the student loan debt in this country. That means that money would go into our economy. It would go into the housing sector. People would be using that money to invest in their futures instead of just paying off debt. And there's a lot of other things we can do with student loan debt as well. We can allow the student loan interest rate to float. Right now, if you got your student loan at the 8% rate, when interest rates drop down to 2%, you are still paying 8%. That's ridiculous. We should also allow people to be able to discharge student loans through bankruptcy. It's the only debt in this country that can't be discharged through bankruptcy. There's a lot that needs to be done. On the other end of this, I've introduced legislation that would provide folks, all young folks, with the opportunity to earn college money in exchange for national service. You know, I picked up a rifle and earned GI Bill money, but I think you should be able to pick up a shovel, you should be able to pick up a chalk, go teach for America, go help us conserve the environment, all of that, have an opportunity to do that in exchange for national service.
Excellent question. You could expect with that measure that we're going to find higher tuition prices in order to make up that difference. And I think a $10,000 loan forgiveness on families earning less than $125,000. If you look at the tax burden from the from the Inflation Reduction Act and what that'll cause to hurt middle-income families, I think that this is just simply playing politics.
So, obviously, this is an issue that's become partisan, but I think it goes beyond that with even, as was mentioned by a caller, those blue-collar workers who traditionally might support Democrats, seeing this as somewhat of a slap in the face. Here's some statistics for you for Illinois. Now, nationwide, there's like $1.6 trillion of student loan debt. In Illinois, we have the 7th highest student loan debt in the nation, standing at $61.6 billion for about 1.6 million borrowers. And the average is about $38,000 per borrower, according to educationdata.org. So that's just a little bit of a picture of what Illinoisans are facing when it comes to student loan debt. Coming back, we'll get a little bit more reaction, including some of your phone calls if you'll call in at 217-629-7970. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. All right, obviously, we're going to have to continue this conversation into the next half hour with your phone calls at 217-629-7970. Still plenty to get to, including this message. If you keep talking about student loan debt, will you please address what is or isn't being done to reduce the insanity of high cost of college, like the inflated cost of ebooks, meals, football coaches, etc.? And I think that that's important. Yeah, that's a conversation that we do need to have. And I think that what really started the drastic inflation of college was student loans. Because there was really like no fault of the colleges if the individual who took out the loan goes to college and doesn't graduate, they're strapped with loans. The school's still getting the money. It's not like, there's a guarantee that, if you don't graduate and you don't get a good job, then you don't have to pay. It's not like a one of those lawyers who's going out there to file a class action lawsuit on your behalf and you don't have to pay unless we win. That's not how it works with colleges. So I think that the start and the ramp up of the exorbitant increase of college tuition really started with the student loan situation where loans were guaranteed and you got loans, you paid them to the school took the money, and if you didn't graduate, no skin off the school's teeth, you just were a bad student. So there's a lot of ins and outs of all of this, and a big question still yet to be addressed is how much this is going to cost and who's going to pay for it. It's widely assumed that taxpayers are going to be picking up the cost of this, but that does not address the universities and the gouging that some people see as apparent, or the endowments. Somebody else over the break saying that they want to see a full audit of university endowments, and they've got tens of billions of dollars just sitting by that they could possibly use to do just this instead of having the taxpayers foot the bill. So we'll get to more of that, but of course your phone calls 217-629-7970. Good morning.
Thank you, Greg, for the chicken or the egg argument. So college tuition has tripled since 1980.
Oh my gosh.
More than tripled. You're saying that's because they've seen the loans? Who knew?
Who knew that kind of thing would happen?
I'm confused on if this gives my family more spending power, more ability to become an entrepreneur, let's say, because we're out of little debt. I don't have any personally. I have no dog in the fight. How does that make the price of oil go up? How does that make the price of Ziploc bags go up? Because I now have more spending power. I don't get the tie to inflation. I'm sorry.
Well, the inflation is going to come from, and those who argue that this is going to lead to inflation, is increased college costs. But also, if taxpayers are going to be on the hook for this, which the estimate is it could be $300 billion, that's $300 additional billion. That what? Where's that going to come from? That's going to come from higher costs paid by the taxpayers.
So you're saying they'll have to raise tax to offset the money that won't be coming in on this. Now, when will taxes be raised to offset the forgiven PPP loans?
No, that's a great question. And you look at how much money was spent all of COVID, and we're talking, it was like $6 trillion. And it's not just the PPP loans, it's the $35 million that the city of Springfield got. That's just kind of, it was extra dollars. The tens of billions of dollars that went to state governments all across the country. I mean, we're talking a lot of money that's been spent, and now we're going to stack on top of that.
I know you weren't a champion of bailing out the banks, if I remember correctly.
I remember Occupy Wall Street, and I'll admit I went to some of those first meetings in Springfield.
We bailed out the airlines. All they did was buy their stock back. We bailed out the banks. We bailed out Wall Street. Now when it comes time to bail out the little guy, oh my Lord, clutch my pearls. No, how can we afford that? As we send another check to Ukraine. Thanks. Greg.
Yeah, $3 billion to Ukraine. Exactly right. No, he's firing on all cylinders there, bringing up a host of issues, and obviously somebody who's out there pounding the streets and working every day, and just familiar with the voice. I know that he doesn't have any student loan debt because he chose to go the trades route instead of going into the higher education, learn about the Jungian theory and gender norms, or whatever the case may be. All right, we'll get to more of your calls coming up. I promise. It is Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. We also still got to get to some of the questions that were asked of the White House yesterday. And did they get any answers? Not really. So stay tuned. That's on the way here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk.
I think it's a good start. I would support for giving $50,000 in student loan debt for for folks who hold student loan debt. There's more more student loan debt held in this country than credit card debt. If we were to forgive $50,000 in student loan debt, that would eliminate about 80% of the student loan debt in this country.
That's U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth yesterday in response to President Joe Biden's quote-unquote forgiveness of $10,000 of student loan debt. Been taking your phone calls this morning and kind of threw out my planner because I was just going to focus on this one segment, but I know a lot of you want to get your voice heard. So call in live and local, 217-629-7970. That's the phone number. You can also email bishoponair@gmail.com or find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. We can connect that way as well. But let's get into, I guess, some of the questions for the White House yesterday. And they, of course, had the president announce this, and then they took questions afterwards in the White House press briefing room. And this is Susan Rice, top advisor to Biden, being asked questions about, really kind of the nuts and bolts of all of this. Like, how much is it going to cost? And who's going to be paying for this? So here's Susan Rice responding to some of those questions.
How much will this cost? How much will Americans have to pay on this price tag overall?
Well, that remains to be determined, and it will be a function of what percentage of eligible borrowers actually take up this opportunity.
300 billion?
We'll see when they take up the opportunity. We'll be able to give you a much better sense
but
of that.
Numbers ballpark at this point?
I think it depends on the numbers. Unfortunately, and we're here to encourage as many people to take it up as possible. If 43 million borrowers take it up, that'll be different than if 50% of those 43 million take it up.
If it is 40.
So again, not really sure on what the cost is going to be. I guess it depends on who's going to take it up. So we'll see on that. But some more questions we'll cover here in a bit. Want to get to your phone calls at 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Good morning. The whole student loan debt forgiveness thing, I'm a little I'm kind of in a funny position. I have 3 children, and 2 of them had student loans, student debts, and they paid them off in the first 2 or 3 years. They went into medical fields, nurses, and stuff like that, and they worked extra shifts, and they paid it off. My 3rd child is just getting ready to graduate next year, so he will absorb some of this $10,000 free money. But my older 2 children, they're like, well, what about us? We did the things. We went to school, got the degree that made the money, and we paid off the debt. And my youngest son, he'll be in that position too when he graduates. But where's my $10,000 going to be at? And I was like, man.
You'd like an answer to that? Well, sir, that question was asked to Susan Rice yesterday at the White House briefing room, and if you hang on, she'll answer that, I guess. And I'd love to hear your response to it if you want to hang on the phone here. All right?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So here's Susan Rice being asked that exact question. What about those who feel like they've been left behind in this whole equation, people who paid their debts, and what's going to happen to them now?
I want to get your general response to this overwhelming chorus of critics, Republicans right now, who say this is unfair, that there are people who decided to not go to college because they couldn't pay for it. There are people who decided to join the armed forces in lieu of going to college because they couldn't pay for it. And this leaves them behind. Is there inaccuracy in any of that?
Yes, there is inaccuracy, but there's also a double standard. And this is a debate we are happy to have. First of all, Republicans didn't complain when certain small businesses during the pandemic got extraordinary financial relief and without having to pay back those loans. But when some businesses needed it and other businesses didn't need it. This is the same principle. We have a country where we all benefit, where the middle and working class are doing well. This relief will be targeted to those who need it most. As I said, 90% of those who will benefit earn less than $75,000 a year. So this is not a giveaway to rich people. This is not any of the things that Republican critics have charged. Yes, those who have paid their loans back deserve to be credited. That's fantastic. That's to their credit.
All right, so yeah, hey, Fantastic. To your credit. Right, you did what you were required to do under a contractual obligation. So your thoughts on that, 217-629-7970. Taking your calls and thoughts on the student loan, quote-unquote, forgiveness. This obviously is going to cost something. What exactly is it going to cost? Again, you've got Illinois having about $61.6 billion in student loan debt, and that's for 1.6 million borrowers. You break those numbers down from educationdata.org, and it shows that it's about $37,757 per borrower in Illinois. So that's obviously something that is going to make an impact for some. Comment coming in here: if taxpayers become responsible for funding higher education for all, liberals will become career students. It's an interesting thought, something I think you might not find too much disagreement with elsewhere. 217-629-7970 is the phone number. Your chance to sound off here with Springfield's Morning News about the student loan forgiveness, which, a lot of people are going to take advantage of it. I mean, would you turn down, here's $10,000 of your debt being wiped away? Would you? You could probably say, I'm going to play my part and not feed into inflation, but get real. After the past 2.5 years, are you going to turn it down, or are you going to take advantage of it? 217-629-7970. Good morning.
Absolutely, we're going to take advantage of it, because it's the only time in our life that you're going to actually be able to get money back from the government, probably. But my question is are we in a national emergency? Because they're using the HEROES Act and claiming that we're in a national emergency to give the education department the ability to do this program. And I don't think we're in a national emergency. I don't think the courts are going to think we're in a national emergency. And I think all of this is going to backfire on them pretty big.
I don't think the legal challenges here have even started. We're going to see that pour through. And the Biden administration's continuing a COVID disaster, and Illinois is right there next to it. Maybe this will all be debated and discussed. So, great point there. 217-629-7970 is the phone number. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Good morning, Greg. Hey, great topic going on today, and a lot of good things. I think it was like 2 callers ago who was talking about how, yes, this pandering for votes. Yes, you are shifting the debt onto the American taxpayers. But what about the other harm that we're doing? We're teaching our kids that you don't have to actually stand up and live to your word. That changes how you life. You teach that physical responsibility. I mean, I went through it, and you know what? It's changed my outlook on life. I pay off all my stuff, paid the house off early, paid the car off early. It changes your mindset as opposed to you're sitting back and well, maybe somebody will come along and take care of this for me.
Yeah.
Stand up and take care of it yourself. You said you would do it, pay it off, live to your word. By, what kind of backsliding are we going to see from things like this?
Yeah, it's good questions and concerns you raised there. And as far as, are we just doing away with abiding to contract law? I mean, really, if you think about it. But what this does also, it doesn't get to the root of the problem. And I think that's another issue that people have with this on all sides of the spectrum is this doesn't hold those colleges accountable for jacking up tuition rates because they got guaranteed money through these student loans. And not being responsible for actually educating the kids and just handing out, diplomas on funny paper. I think that this really doesn't get to the crux of that problem. And what about those endowments? What about the higher ed administrators getting 6 figures and so on? Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Good morning, Greg. I can't fault anybody for wanting to take advantage of this. But, I know you worked hard to get where you're at, and you look back at the trials that you went through, and you look at that as, a good thing that you worked hard and you achieved something. To me, this devalues education that people are going to get, and it's a slow process of actually devaluing it. But this also plays into the Cloward and Piven strategy. that you know what that is.
Go ahead and explain it.
Well, it's basically two professors that propose that if they can overwhelm our welfare system or our financial system of our governments, that they can bring our government down. Now, our founders told us that when the government becomes corrupt and to a certain level of badness, that we have the right to overthrow it and replace it. But that needs to be done in a very, really a peaceful way. But they're in the process of destroying themselves.
Well, and there's a process for holding government accountable as well, and it's through elections. Now, we'll see what happens in November. But, I don't think many people are holding their breath that they'll get much done. One last call here. You got to make it quick. I am right up against time. Good morning.
Hey, Greg, real quick. I just had a curiosity of how does this look going forward? So next year I enroll in school. I immediately get my $10,000 loan.
Yeah, I think they announced that it's only up to like June 30th if you've had loans up to June 30th. So that's kind of the I guess time frame there. Appreciate everybody chiming in. I've got to take a break. It is Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY.